Good evening. We'll call the May 11th Planning Commission meeting to order. Mr. Sullivan, call roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Butler.
Present.
Mr. Calley. Here. Mr. Jenkins.
Present.
Mr. McDonald.
Here.
Ms. Qualls. Here. Ms. Rainey.
Here.
Ms. Schulist.
Here.
Ms. Sinyard.
Here.
All present.
Thank you, sir. Move to the opening prayer and pledge, if you'll join me. Lord, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll go to approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Rainey Anderson. Any additional discussion? Mr. Sullivan?
Ms. Rainey.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Mr. Calley. Aye. Mr. Jenkins.
Aye.
Mr. McDonald.
Aye.
Ms. Rainey. Sorry. Ms. Qualls. Ms. Schulist.
Aye.
Ms. Sinyard.
Aye.
Sir, move to citizens' comments.
We have 3 tonight. The first is Amelia Rousseau.
Hi.
Good evening.
My name's Amelia Rousseau. 7374 Hunting Camp Road is my family's property. I was born there and raised there. My dad purchased this land in 1968 when there was barely anything in Fairview. He purchased our property, which is close to 50 acres, because of its natural beauty and rich history of once being the hunting grounds for the Indians that lived along the South Harpeth River, hence the name Hunting Camp. We have 2 creeks that run through our property, Niblett Creek and Hunting Camp Creek. I'm here today to advocate on behalf of the abundant wildlife and natural beauty of Niblett Creek and Hunting Camp Creek that is being destroyed by Otter Creek subdivision. Otter Creek subdivision has negligently used Niblett Creek as their drainage ditch since they began development. We have brought pictures with us today that show where Otter Creek subdivision has built drain culverts in the woods that point directly at the headwaters of Niblett Creek. Otter Creek has 2 retention ponds on the property, but both have continually had problems and fail to adequately control stormwater. The silt fencing in place on the property also continually fails and allows silt to run into the woods. The problem of poor stormwater management continues to worsen as Otter Creek is allowed to continue to build. Every time it rains, Niblett Creek is filled with red, silty runoff water from the subdivision. This red silt has settled on the entire creek bed in this once pristine creek. This fine red silt is extremely detrimental to the delicate ecosystem that is full of life in Niblett Creek and in Hunting Camp Creek. We have endlessly reported Otter Creek subdivision to TDEC and to city officials in Fairview, but the problem only worsens. I'm asking you to please reconsider releasing the bonds for Otter Creek subdivision until they have rectified and corrected their inadequate stormwater management system. I'm also asking the planning board to please take a second look at the Otter Creek plans and see if they even had adequate stormwater calculations in the original plans. On behalf of me, my family, my neighbors, and all the residents of Fairview that care about protecting the watershed here in our community, I beg you to please take a second look at how Otter Creek is negatively impacting the watershed, and I urge you to help us hold them accountable for the damage they've already done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Butler.
Yes, sir.
Would it be appropriate to ask for the photos that she has?
Yes, sir.
You printed them out? Thank you.
And we have more that we are happy to email you guys. Those are just a few of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question also? What has been the response from TDEC? Will you bring that up too?
On that, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, next we have Mr. Aaron Davis.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak here. My name's Aaron Davis. I live at 7389 Hunting Camp. I originally contacted the builders when I started to notice what was going on to my yard. I'm neighbors with Amelia's family. Spoke to them. They put me off. The builders did, pretty rudely, frankly. I contacted an attorney. They said, look, you need to contact TDEC. TDEC will then cite them with X, Y, and Z violations and whatnot. They'll have 60 days to remedy those before you're even able to file suit, which I did. It's about 30 pages that was their infractions in the recording, which I've got here, and pictures, all of which are not here, but I ran out of ink. But this is in August. Those pictures are from last weekend. They're just not doing anything. There's not a silt fence. That subdivision stands to make millions of dollars, and a silt fence is less than 20 at the Tractor Supply. And to me, it just seems brazen. I'm all for development. I've got property myself. To do it in this fashion with such disregard, I mean, they got pictures of the creek in their office, which if they took those same pictures today, it'd be orange. And it just seems like, I think that our city deserves better, and I think that the ability to withhold or to not refund the funds for the bond, which is to ensure that they do what they say they're gonna do, in addition to going out and inspecting. They didn't have permits to do the phase 2 with TDEC, and they were already building on it before they even had permission to do so. That it would, your consideration in this regard would be much appreciated.
So,
Thank you, sir.
what was the response from TDEC?
They've got, let's see, I mean, I can,
Did TDEC take any action?
yes, they have not, they have fined them in multiple fines. I don't believe they paid any of them as of Monday. I don't know what they've done. What's today? Tuesday? Tuesday. Yeah, as of yesterday, they had not paid the fines that they had been issued already. I don't know I don't know to what degree TDEC has done additional stuff on top of this. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that there was through the Freedom of Information Act or something, a gal that was opposing the development from the same developer beside Bowie Park had noticed that there was no stormwater information at that development, and they haven't done anything at this development either.
Not the same developer.
Tony Cavender?
He's not doing,
Okay. Okay.
Is it okay to state publicly who the developer is?
Regarding the other subdivision?
No, regarding
Otter
this one.
Creek.
Otter Creek.
Yes, we can't prevent anyone from.
Huh?
We can't prevent anyone from stating the development.
Yeah, I'd like for it to be on YouTube.
I'm gonna plead the fifth. I don't know if I'm able to say that because I personally am in litigation with them. They attempted to settle last week to a degree that was laughable. They have prevented me from visiting the site and taking pictures, or else I'm trespassing. Their offer to settle did not include cleaning up the creek. It didn't include any inspections afterwards. It didn't include a level of turbidity, which is the level of solids that are in the water to be measured. Of course, the state of Tennessee doesn't have a level that says this is clean and this is dirty. And so the measure in that regard is purely a visible difference in water quality. And if you look at this picture, it's clear. I mean, you can see the bottom on one half and the other half is.
The state does have a measurement, and they use it every day when they monitor our sewer treatment plants. They have a measurement.
Okay, as far, Barry Sulkin, who worked for TDEC for 14 years and is now in private practice, is helping me on the soil, on the science side of things, and has stated that for this particular ordeal, that there isn't a baseline of turbidity. So it's beyond my pay grade. But I appreciate the board. I think we have an opportunity, this board has an opportunity to enforce and hold them accountable. Just do the right thing, man. You're gonna make a bunch of money. Fairview's blowing up. Williamson County is one of the most desirable places in the world for a good reason, because it's so beautiful. For them to tear it up like this is poor form.
Yeah, so the question is it Mr. Cavander's development? The answer is yes. Otter Creek is yes.
Third tonight, we have Meredith Kyson, sorry. You would state your address as well, please.
7321 Cox Run Court. Chairman Butler and the Planning Commission, I'm not here to talk about Cox Run. I'm not a developer, I'm an investor. I have participated in a lot of projects in several counties across Tennessee. I'm one of those silent investors on developments that's not always silent. And when the Groves property issue started coming up around Christmas time, I thought this should be simple to solve. There's somebody out there who's going to put the right development on that property. And I started calling around my developer friends. And I was stunned. One after another, they said, Fairview, we won't touch Fairview with a 10-foot pole. And so I started saying, what is this about? And they said, it's the planning process, and it's the lack of infrastructure. And so I was stunned by this, and so I chose to start looking into the process. And part of my reason to be here tonight is the design, item 4, the design review manual. I should explain that I'm a retiree from the federal government. I've served the United States on at least 2 international energy commissions. And I am, Mr. Potter will understand, but I am a subject matter expert in the field of command media. And that is the interpretation and implementation of regulations. So I'm one of those weird people that grooves on regulations. And so I have been going through your regulations, and I find the design review manual to be laudable. There are great chunks in it that I would have written myself. I suspect I'm right behind Mr. Collins in appreciating the value of plagiarism. And so I'm like, what is it about this that people are finding so hard? And what is it about it? Is it the implementation? Is it the process? If I was auditing your process, I'd be hard put to find something wrong. So what is going wrong with your process? And so I want you as the Planning Commission to give serious thought to why people won't come to Fairview, because I think it's ripe for excellent development. I think, executives in Nashville are moving west. I've been in on a project in Humphreys County. They're moving a fair bit west. So why are they ignoring the opportunities that Fairview has to offer? That's what I want you all to think about tonight. And I'll also chip in that I might have been a Otter Creek resident, except I sat through the sales pitch from the Otter Creek people, and they told me that the step system was only temporary, and it was only going to be there until the city of Fairview put in water and sewers, drainage system. And fortunately, I checked up on them. And so I am not a resident of Otter Creek, and I have watched what's happened with pollution downstream, and it concerns me. As an environmentalist, it concerns me. And thank you for listening to me this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is all we have tonight for citizens' comments.
Thank you, sir. We'll move to approval of the minutes from the April 13th, 2021 work session and the April 13th, 2021 regular meeting.
Second.
Anderson, Rainey, any discussion or questions? Mr. Sullivan?
Mr. Anderson? Aye. Ms. Rainey?
Aye.
Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Mr. Calley?
Aye.
Mr. J-
Aye.
Mr. McDonald?
Aye.
Ms. Wall?
Aye.
Ms. Schuler?
Aye.
Ms. Hilliard?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Move to new business, PC Resolution PC 24-21, subdivision regulation interpretation. Sam Burgess, major subdivision, map 47, parcels 92.02, 92.03, 92.04, applicant Joe Chapdelaine. Good evening, Mr. Burgess.
Thank you. Good evening. My name's Sam Burgess. I'm just outside of city limits, Fairview citizen, and I took advantage of a property that came on the market on Cumberland Road, right where it meets Forest Glen, just on the edge of the city limits, or pretty close to it. I bought a 5-acre tract that had a pretty run-down double wide on it, and mostly for the concept of keeping my men busy, cleaning it up, and 5 acres was pretty special around here these days. So I thought, okay, I got it for a good price. So I bought it, and I thought I can surely, because it's in city limits, put a lot behind it. And so that was my original intent. And as I got into the process, the neighbors approached me. They said, you know, we've got 6 acres, and we have no use for the back 3 acres whatsoever. And I said, well, you know, I'm building a fairly expensive driveway. I'm taking power back. I'm taking water back. I've got sewer approval. So I don't think it'll be a problem to add your lot to this little area, not knowing all the ins and outs. So I talked to Mr. Chapdelaine, and I said, is there a way to make this work where I can use the little double-wide manufactured home on a permanent foundation and put another home behind it on the 3 acres, 3.8 acres that remains, and share that driveway to put another home on the 3 acres to the right of it. Beautiful little area, right next to the right before you drop off the hill on Cumberland. And so we started through the process, and we thought we were hitting all the boxes with our road frontage, correct amount of area for the lot, road frontage for each lot, with the exception of the neighbors. To get to their lot, we had to create an easement to get to their lot. So it's a flagpole, I guess you call it technically. And that's basically the gist of this little project.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
So to give some more detail to that, ladies and gentlemen, the lot that was created, the first lot that was created was a subdivision lot that was approved as a 1-acre subdivision lot back in 1999 by this planning commission. And in that subdivision plat was the remainder of that parcel, somewhere around 4-point-something acres. It was shown on the plat, and it was shown as potentially to be utilized in later years, which is where it's coming up to you folks today. The purpose was, at the time, I believe, and Brother Randy can speak better to it because he's the one who presented it in 1999, was to the owner wanted to divide out the acre lot in front with the house. There was a dirt drive that entered that property. It also continued on to the 4-acre property. And so those 2 tracts were described in a deed into two different tract statements. So you had the 1 acre and then you had the 4 acres. Either one of those could have been sold separately or together at any one time. When Mr. Burgess had wanted to reshape the acre lot in the front, I believe he was trying to do some correction on where maybe some existing sewer lines were actually crossing the septic field. I mean, the property lines were crossing the septic field. Anyway, he was looking at that, maybe extending that and making it a narrower lot within the regulations, and then also creating a flag lot with 50 foot on the road frontage. Both tracks would now have what would be considered a adequate road frontage, whether it's 50 foot as a flag lot, which would have to be considered, and then the 1 acre tract in front. As we looked at the regulations, as we normally do, both lots met the criteria for a legal lot of record, following the process of going through the planning commission, of course. As Mr. Burgess came to us after the fact, as we started this process, as he mentioned about the neighbors selling or wanting to sell the back half of their property, the only access would be obviously through a 50-foot easement, which is also an access easement onto to the rear of the property.
Can I show this to you guys? Do you want to see what it looks like?
Yes, sir. Keith, is there any chance that we have that on there or no? No, go. Make sure. We did get this in our packet too, so I'll pay if you can pass it to the end and send it back. Yeah. Good. Good.
In the regulations, a legal lot of record requires either as a flag lot, 50-foot minimum road frontage, or I forget what the minimum is, 130, 160 feet for the other. We had both of those criteria met for both lots. So they would both be legal lots of records if the Planning Commission approved the redivision here. And the issue comes in is the interpretation of what a access easement is. Now that becomes a legal discussion as opposed to one described of conformity to either having or not having road frontage, or having or not having proper square footage, setbacks and that sort of thing. With a legal access easement, you're basically, it's as an easement, you're the only rights, you're not giving up rights. In fact, I have a term I'd like to read out of, if I may, what an easement. Easement in land created by grant or agreement that confers a right on owners, private or public, to some profit, benefit, dominion, or lawful use of the estate of another. And I'll read further. An easement restricts but does not abridge the rights of the fee owner to the use and enjoyment of his land. So one of the conditions, as I understood the staff to say, was because we're adding a 50-foot easement, basically they're stating that you're giving up the rights of the property owner that has the rights of that 50-foot minimum road frontage. And that's not what an easement does. It does not give up the rights of that owner that the easement resides on to. Gives rights to the property that it's given use to. It's being served by that property.
Yeah, Mr. Chapman, if I could just interject just briefly, that's not what staff is stating. The 50-foot easement is regardless to the staff. The central question for staff is that in the subdivision regulations, it states that if you subdivide more than two lots, in this case, you're dividing two lots into four, if I remember correctly. I believe the document that's passing along you demonstrates 4 lots on 2 parcels where it would be changed. And the simple question that the staff has is the regulations state that in a subdivision developed in that manner where you're doing more than 2, the access must be public access roadway to city standard. That's the central question, public access roadway. So by that interpretation, a public access roadway would mean that it has to be a public road providing access to each of the 4 lots. So our only concern is the public access roadway. We're not concerned with the easement question. We're concerned with the regulation that states it must be public access roadway.
In fact, there is public access roadway. The first flag lot has 50 feet, which is the minimum road frontage. So that has public access from a public road. The second lot, I don't have the dimensions in front of me. In the neighboring lot, both have the minimum road frontage. So all three of those lots have minimum road frontage if the Planning Commission accepts the reconfiguration of those lots. The easement comes into play only for the lot in the rear, and it's, again, as an access easement. It was commented to me that in part, one of the reasons for the denial was that there was basically stating that we were accessing three separate lots on a I assume they were replying to an access easement, which technically could be, technically it's incorrect because the only lot that required an access easement is the third lot. None of the three frontage lots requires an easement. You can add an easement, you can take an easement away. All three lots will still have public road frontage and will not change from that minimum requirements for subdivision lots.
And again, not to be argumentative, I would just simply state that if you look at the document you have in front of you, it divides 2 parcels into 4 parcels, and at least 3 of those 4 parcels are accessed by one drive.
No,
That-
I think that's incorrect, sir. I think you're misinterpreting the rules. I've been doing this for 50 years, and that's not correct. I'm just saying that each of those has public road. You could build 3 houses there or change it into 3 houses. It's only the property in the rear that will access the easement. Whether or not other people use that easement is neither here nor there.
Mr. Chapman, we're not concerned with the easement. We're just simply concerned with the regulation that states
Well,
if
the
you
road,
divide it in that manner.
you're referring to, you can give any property an easement, multiple easement. You could give it a lot, 100 easements if you want to. You can, because even though they use the same driveway, does not interpret that to be a major road. That's the misinterpretation.
Mr. Chaplain, it says that if you're going to have more than one parcel access it from one right-of-way, you'd have to have a public right-of-way improvement. So like in our zoning ordinances, the definition of permanent access easement is any permanent easement shall be in compliance with section 1-113.107 of the Fairview subdivision regulations, which is the document that's in front of us that references you can't give a buildable permit unless it has the 50-foot public access easement.
Yes, sir, and the rear
So,
lot will have the 50.
As designed, you have two lots being accessed by one easement,
Well, no, sir, they
by
own.
one
they own
50-foot
the-
access to the public road.
They own the property, and if a person owns a property, he can give an easement to anyone else, whether you call that a driveway or not. It's still his property and it's still
But it wouldn't be a
public road.
buildable lot. They can have an easement, absolutely, but it would not be a buildable lot because of the subdivision regulations.
Well, I think you're interpreting incorrectly, sir.
I think it says, and we've had a precedent, I would say, be set in Fairview off of prior things that have come up over the years where multiple parcels were accessed by one. It was, discussed, but.
Well, in this case, all lots have public, the 3 lots in the front have public road, and you're just giving one easement to the person in the rear. That's the main bottom line.
But that access would have to have access to a public right-of-way,
But
by the way, this language.
Through an easement, it would have public access.
But then that easement needs to be improved public right-of-way. That's the way it reads.
I believe, sir, it reads that,
Could they have a 50-foot access on the right side of the property or from the 6-acre parcel next door? And then it would have a direct access to a public road.
Topographically, that would be a challenge.
Jones?
so, again, I think you're trying to infer that an easement is, an access easement is just the rights for a specific use.
No, sir. The zoning ordinances state the definition of the permanent access easement from our subdivision regulations.
Right. And
So
I'm
that
trying
would be
to find
the-
that reading because there's a part in there I'd like to read and point out to you how it could be interpreted slightly differently. based on our position on this. I'm having a hard time finding it right now.
I think the difference is private versus public. I think that's where we're.
Well,
I'd like to make one
There you
small
go.
statement. I've done several.
Mr. Burgess, if you could just make sure you're speaking on that microphone for me.
I've done multiple projects in Williamson County, and it is black and white. You got 200 foot of road frontage, you got a lot. It doesn't matter if you can take road, as long as you can have 3 lots or 10 lots in a row. If each lot has 200 feet of road frontage, you can share the driveway. All 10 lots can share a driveway if they have the road, if they've met the road frontage criteria.
In Williamson
and the
County,
square foot.
according to the subdivision regulations, yes, sir.
Right, so that's kind of where I got off on thinking that this was a likely possibility.
Yes, sir.
And it's not the end of the world either way, honestly. To me, it's just a great opportunity to provide another 3-acre gorgeous tract in Fairview. Seems a shame to waste it. Those folks don't want to use it. I'm already building a very expensive driveway and taking utilities to the back. Just seemed a shame not to take advantage of it.
I understand, and I'm all common sense. I'm a common sense girl. I really am. But I also have to, I do understand that, you know, what it means, you know, the black and white of it, and we have to kind of stick to that. But I do appreciate where you're coming from, for sure, and I appreciate that.
Unfortunately, I don't believe this is black and white, as well as if we're building lots, we have black and white information. We have road frontage, we have setbacks, we have acreages. And just because an easement is placed, the rights for someone else to use a person's property doesn't change the ability of that particular landowner to use, access, build, do whatever he has. And that's basically what you're stating, is all these 3 tracts have public road frontage. All 3 tracts have the required public road frontage, the required acreages, and there is one tract that requires an access easement. Tract 1 doesn't require an access easement. It has road frontage. It happens to be using the same access easement that the lot in the rear is. Tract number 2 does not require access easement, but it too has a road frontage. And that's where the difference of the interpretation is I think it's coming in shortfall here. And that's where we're coming from, based of, as Randy mentioned, 50 years of doing this across the board, across the state, in multiple municipalities. And when it comes to property owners, property rights are not taken away because of an easement. It's only restricted because of an easement. And if that easement is required and is needed to gain access to a parcel in the rear, and it's allowed by the subdivision regulations, then that also becomes a legal lot once it goes through the process. So that's where we're coming from.
My question, right now, you're talking about parcel 3, and we do not see on this drawing, it's being detached from another piece of property, correct?
Well, we're kind of putting the neighbors that were selling the lot behind
Right,
them.
but-
Joe determined that it was best to design this as a 4-lot subdivision.
Right, I understand that, but my point is that at the present time, that piece of property is attached to other property.
Correct, it's a 6-acre tract to the.
Okay, so
to the
therefore,
east.
that piece of property has the potential of having an easement access to the public road from another piece of property. It's not a landlocked piece of property. Because today, it's not parceled off.
That's correct.
Okay,
It's
so-
not landlocked. You could, just like sometimes, you know, we put septic fields out in places that are impractical just in order to say that that's a septic field. You could say that there's an imaginary access to that lot back there, but you couldn't practically build one just by the way that particular lot lays.
I understand. So what my point is, we're not, by denying this, we're not denying access to this piece of property. The piece of property right now is accessed from its original body that it's connected to.
That is correct,
So,
6-acre tract.
therefore, the piece of property can be developed from another direction, and at this point, the way this is set up, it doesn't meet the city's criteria, so therefore, I think what the city people are telling you is correct. Yeah, it looks like a good piece of property, and ingress, egress is required for all parcels, but this is a broke-away parcel from an existing piece of property. And so my opinion, I fall with our city.
I understand that. It seems to me like the 50-foot road frontage that Lot 2 owns is not an easement. So it's only created as an addition, it's only created as an easement to access Lot 3. So there's really only one easement. It's the easement that happens to correspond with the same width of Lot 2's road frontage. And so I think somehow that's kind of being, I don't know, overlaid in a way that I don't know is, I mean, obviously it's not going to fly, so I might as well save my breath.
Mr. Burgess, may I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
I'm just trying to think of the consequences of our decision, right? So just reading this out here, it says where a permanent easement is proposed to provide access to more than one lot or tract of land, an access way shall be constructed within the easement which will meet or exceed the standards for design and construction of public ways set forth in these regulations. So is the discussion really around the standard in which you'll construct that road, that access road?
It could be. Typically what we do, what I've done in the past, is just build a nice driveway, nice 12-foot wide driveway, widen it out in the corners so if cars need to pass, they can. I think when you go to the next level, which I understand is like curbed and guttered and blacktopped, financially, completely blown out of the water. You have to have 20 or 30 lots or, 10 or something, some number that you can divide that expense into that makes it practical.
So it really comes down to a financial discussion on whether or not, if this is considered the way.
Even just the way you worded it of these two accesses, it's really one guy, the guy that owns Lot 2, owns the road frontage. The only one that's utilizing his road frontage is Lot 3. So there's really only one person, it seems like.
Mr. Burgess, I would have to, I drove by the property this morning, I stopped by there, took a picture.
Thank you.
From what I could tell, it looks like this is the same driveway, so that the property in Lot 1 is also using that same easement.
It is.
So it
is
would be
close.
Lot
It's
1
like-
and Lot 3 would
That's
be
true.
using the
And I've
easement.
kind of tried to build it, you saw it with the two gates?
Yes, sir.
So that part, that means that Lot 1 is actually, falls under the shared drive concept. Lot 1 has plenty of road frontage. If we wanted to put a driveway further down the hill, we could. But because it's on this, because of where it is originally, where it was built, it falls to me under more like the shared driveway concept. Does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying.
I understand both interpretations, and it looks like he's showing Mr. Potter. I'd like to hear if it opens up the city to any legal issues with maintenance or any, neighbors kind of thing.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I have not been presented with this question before tonight, so I'm sitting here trying to decipher it, but no one's asked my opinion about it before tonight. I would have to defer an answer to it until I could look at it a little bit more.
I do think it's a good use of the lot, and I understand both interpretations. Be more concerned with what legally, financially it could burden the city with, since it's a shared drive with no HOA.
From my perspective, the easy solution, and I say easy just because I've never engineered this driveway, but if the driveway for Lot 1 wasn't coming off of the easement to Lot 2, and if it had a separate driveway in front of that property, it seems like that would resolve the issue, would it not? Because then the easement would only be used to access one lot, not more than one lot.
Driveway can be moved physically with some excavation and whatnot. It's actually only encroaching into the 50-foot road frontage 14 feet. So 14 feet of it goes into that 50 feet that's the road frontage for Lot 2. So if I needed to move my beautiful black four-rail fence over 15 feet, I'd probably be game, mostly, honestly, to tell you the truth. The neighbors are so dadgum excited
Yeah.
that this will break their heart. It's not gonna break my heart, it'll break their heart. So that's really part of the motivation. But I can move the fence and I can move that drive.
I respect that. I'm just trying to come up with a solution for you.
appreciate
Yeah. Is that something, Mr. Blackburn, does that sound like it would be a reasonable solution?
You would still need 50 feet for each one. Right.
So generally in staff, where we talked and this would require a waiver from the planning commission to do this, but what we've talked about internally, and I certainly understand the petitioner's question about the cost and upgrades to do all this, particularly if you're doing curb and gutter, some other things for what is in effect a relatively short road. So our best solution that we've come up with, they're already talking about 50-foot right-of-way, as I understand or easements is what we're talking, your terminology, or easements, turning off of Cumberland to the back of lot number 2.
Lot two owns the 50-foot of road frontage. Lot 3 would share that 50-foot to get to his.
Correct. So for our discussions internally, the best solution we could come up with that would be reasonable, middle of the road would be a 50-foot right-of-way dedicated to the city, because you're talking about 50-foot easement. 50 feet is 50 feet, be it easement or right-of-way. Construct the road for it to be 2 lanes, 2 11-foot lanes to lane standards, waive curb and gutter, flush the sides of the road. So if there were ever to be any future access beyond lot number 3 into the property to the right, if you're looking at it from Cumberland Drive, there'd be access to that, so you could do that. So you'd have a 50-foot right-of-way, waive curb and gutter, build the 2 lanes, flush the shoulders, call it a city street.
Would you go 2 lanes wide to the point where Lot 3's driveway split off, and then it'd be 2 separate driveways?
We wouldn't care. As long as you have 50 feet with 2 lanes that get you to lot number 3, however you got into lot number 3 itself.
Okay, but once you hit that point where Lot 3's traffic was leaving the property.
Correct.
Onto its own property, then both of them would just be.
That could be a
single
driveway, certainly.
Okay, that's a great.
Certainly.
That's a great effort and a good solution.
That's
I don't think it blows it out of the water to possibly do that.
Our goal as staff is to make sure we keep everyone within the regulations, but offer you a solution that doesn't break the budget in the bank for something that's dirt 50 feet, whether it's any other thing. So that would be our solution if it were to come back to the planning commission, would be to offer that as a compromise.
Yeah, it wouldn't be required within lot 3, that back lot.
I guess that.
To the line.
Would I be able to leave Lot 1's driveway where it is?
Looking at this, I don't see why you could not do that. Now, obviously, it's going to have a shorter driveway because it's
Right,
going to
it's
turn
super
into the
short.
right.
Yeah.
But
very
looking at this, I don't know we have a way that we could prevent you from doing that. As long as that 50-foot right-of-way was 50 foot and their driveway turns off of that, I think that accomplishes the goal.
I think we can do that. I think we can do that.
Mr. Chapdelaine, do you have something you'd like to say? I'm sorry,
I was just mentioning to her, but I've answered your question. If there was an easement, a driveway easement, that would be taken care of in the deed. It'd be a shared driveway that all parties would have to maintain.
Yeah, I've been part of ones that have done that. I just didn't know legally from the city's wording interpretation what that might, it's just not done as commonly out here in Fairview, so
Right.
wanted to make sure.
I think if it's only 2 lots, that wouldn't be an issue. When we go to 3 lots is where the issue's brought in. So that will be our only concern, is making sure we stay within that guideline. If we did that, had that dedicated to the city, you do the 50 feet with the 2 lanes. Again, our suggestion would be to waive the storm drain, curb and gutter, and then just provide the lanes themselves. I think that would be adequate, and that's what the staff would propose to the planning commission.
Would crush and run for the surface be acceptable?
I'd have to take a little deeper look at that. Probably not. Probably gonna have to be asphalt.
Yes, sir, it'd have to be asphalt to city standard for that section
That's
with,
a great solution. I appreciate the opportunity. That's going to pretty much kill it. There's another driveway when you go down to the bottom of Cumberland where I developed 3 lots. My excavator built a road there. It's just off the charts. It's super nice, super thick, more gravel than you'd ever imagine. But that's the type of roads that we're familiar with building. I wouldn't know, other than to get a local driveway done, who to even call for blacktop. So it kind of gets out of my world when we change that surface. So if that is part of the criteria, I understand if it is, then, but that's not something that leaves it as a feasible, I think. I could try to price this thing out and figure it out when I'm not in front of all of y'all, but it sounds like it'd be tough.
Yeah, the only other option, which I would not suggest, but it is the purview of the plan commission, is if they're to grant a waiver of that requirement. Again, I wouldn't suggest that because forever's a long time. But that's.
Well, the nice thing about the way this road's gonna lay is it's not on a slope. So
Understood.
if it's well-built and well-gravelled, it will withstand the test of time, as all of the other roads that I've done over the past 10 years with my excavator.
Would it be unheard of, to table it for next month and let Mr. Potter look into the interpretation and legal in case we did want to do so? I mean, I've seen it done a lot, and although I would suggest looking into a blacktop, it's really not that hard and that much more.
When you go 22 feet wide, it adds up.
Well, I'm just saying, it really is coming down today with as much as concrete's going up.
Agreed.
Yes, I don't think there was an anticipation that the board would make a decision tonight. I think the interpretation was more the question, so I don't
I'm
speak.
happy to provide a legal opinion. I just want to look at it a little closer.
And I really appreciate you guys taking all this under consideration. I really do.
Ms. Senyard, is that a motion for deferment?
A motion to defer.
I'll second.
Thank you guys very much.
And I know a good
Mr. Burgess.
blacktop guy in White Bluff.
I'll get that number.
Okay.
Senyard, Anderson, additional discussion or questions? Mr. Sullivan?
Ms. Senyard?
Aye.
Who was second?
Anderson?
Oh, was it Anderson? Okay.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Ms. Rainey?
Aye.
Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Mr. Cowley? Mr. Jenkins?
Aye.
Mr. McDonald?
Aye.
Ms. Qualls?
Aye.
Ms. Schulis?
Aye.
Motion is deferred.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Item 2, PC Resolution PC 25-21, Final Plat, Avery Acres Subdivision, 3 building lots on 3.32 acres, map 42, parcel 66, property owners Keith William Mangrum and Becky Ann Taylor. Mr. Prince is present if anybody has any questions. Or if you have anything to tell us, Mr. Prince.
Hello, name's Alex Prince. I lived out here in Fairview for 30-plus years, currently living out in West Nashville. Moving back out here next month, but I have contract on this property, and Keith and Becky are the owners, and they have given me permission to get this approved before I get my financing and close on the property. Originally, I was gonna try to do about 5 or 6 lots, but I didn't want to have to go through the rezoning process. So I just kept it simple and just wanted to meet the proper setbacks and zoning that's currently there, so.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Blackburn, do you have any staff comments to add to this?
All of our comments were met by the applicant.
Big contract.
So it's zoned R40 and they're just breaking it up to R40 1-acre lots essentially.
If there's no other discussion, I guess I'll go ahead and make a motion if there's no other discussion.
I'll make a second.
Your motion for, sir.
Hold on, let me make a motion first. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve this request with, as it is written, as resolution number 25-21 is written.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Jenkins, Senyard. Any additional questions or discussion? Mr. Sullivan?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you guys so much.
New business item 3, PC Resolution PC-26-21, rezoning William C. Sullivan and Catherine Sullivan, current zoning Commercial General, proposed zoning RM20 multifamily, 37.14 acres, map 46, part of parcel 87, property owners, estate of Laura Catherine Sullivan. Anyone present tonight that has any information they'd like to share? You, sir?
Good evening, Ben Eastep. Just here to represent, I have the property under contract and would like to rezone the back 37.14 acres to multifamily.
Thank you, sir.
How big is the entire parcel?
48, so the front about 11 acres will stay commercial.
Any discussion?
Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name when you first came up.
Ben Eastep.
All right, Mr. Eastep.
Yes, sir.
How familiar are you with the City of Fairview's plan for growth, the 2040 Comprehensive Plan?
Very familiar.
Okay.
Well, hold on. Familiar.
Familiar.
I shouldn't say.
That's fine. So currently, on our future land use map, this tract of land is planned for, let me pull it back up here. Appropriate zonings could be RS15, RS8, RS5, or RM8. The RM20 lot, the RM20 zoning doesn't even come up in the future land use map in that comprehensive plan except for one tiny little area near I-40 off of 96. That's just really, really dense multifamily residential. It's nothing that we had thought about or planned for this area. RM8 seems to be about as dense as the plan is allowing us to go.
Would it be correct with if an RM20, 37 acres, that would essentially allow for 742 units?
Well, sure it would, but just because of sewer capacity and the way the land's set up and everything else, there's no way any of that won't even get close to that type of density on that, just because of the way the ground sits and everything else.
But the zoning would technically allow it, I guess would be the question, would be.
I guess technically it would, sure.
Do you have a number that you guys are?
I don't,
shooting for?
but this all comes back to sewer capacity is all it comes back to. So there's, it couldn't even get close to that amount of density as far as that goes from a sewer capacity.
Mr. Eastep, did you have alternate zonings that you had thought about instead of RM20?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at, we'd like to get it to the multifamily, but, the objective on all this is for workforce housing, because there's a tremendous need for that in this community. And so, yeah, it may be a little bit higher density, but keep in mind when that kind of density sometimes scares people from the standpoint of, my Lord, there's going to be that much density. But to be affordable for workforce housing, there'll be a lot of studios that'll allow people that can't afford to live in Franklin or West Nashville to be able to live out here. So the density may be a little overwhelming, but first of all, we can't get near the density. But it'll allow us to come in and add those type of apartments. And then there may be, when we come back in for the site plans or the master review, that the density will be much less. That way we can come in and ask for that at a further point.
So is the plan an apartment product or a townhome product or a condo product?
It's probably a total mix, there's no question. So it'll be, we're not going to go up there and put up 5-story buildings that'll have 740 units there. It just won't be there. The unit mix that needs to go up there for the workforce housing will be a lot of the affordable, smaller units, but then there'll also be potentially a single-family element up there, a duplex type element, a cottage type element. So it'll be absolute mixed use.
So if we visited a single family or a duplex or cottage we would have to do another rezoning?
Just
adjustment?
anything with single-family or duplex would require this to come back either as a straight zoning for those areas or to come back as master development plan with a overlay to allow those.
And that is our intention, is to come back in front of you for a whole overlay type district. But at this point, just get the zoning so that way we can start that process.
Just to offer some math into this, I'm not trying to sway one or the other, but just to do the math, if we were talking the whole 37 acres at RM8, if it was all flat, all 37 acres developable, under RM8, you would have a total of 304 units. If you were to take half of that property and be able to develop it RM20, you're talking about 380 units.
But if you have RM8, you get that use, even if you can't develop it all, you would still get that number, so you'd still be able to use the same amount of number of total units.
Correct. So if you're RM8, obviously there's some other things, but just simple the math of that. The RM8 for the whole parcel, if it was all developable, would allow the 304, half of it developable to RM20. So whether you go to an RM8 or an RM20, the only difference would be if only half of it's developable and you do RM8, then obviously that 304 unit number drops to half of that. So you'd be at 160 units. So that would be the.
Well, no, you would still get the yield, the density yield of an RM8 of the overall acreage. Is that not correct?
Possibly, depending on how you could develop it out.
I think I just want to reiterate that we want to get the density where it's at now, but there will be a master overlay that comes back in. So I can tell you that there won't be 700 units up there, because I keep going back to the standpoint that from a sewer perspective, it's just not feasible. It won't happen because there's only so much capacity that can.
But to elaborate on that, if you could, at this current moment, you have no idea what that number might be. You just know it's not 700 and something.
I can tell you there's, from the sewer capacity, there's no way that can be up to 700 and whatever that number.
I get a question that comes up for me is that we're here, you're asking for rezoning, but then you either don't want to tell us or you don't have an idea of what you're going to build or how many units there's going to be. It just kind of seems.
Well, I guess we're doing this so that way we can come back in and you have to approve whatever we're going to try to put on there. So it's not that we're trying to get this density, so therefore we have a starting point, because we have to come back and get approval from you guys on no matter what we wind up doing. It will be a mix of multifamily, single family, a cottage type setting, duplex, whatever else. But to get the zoning now, then that will allow us to come back in and address to you what we're wanting to do for the whole thing.
If I'm off base here, but help me out. But I guess if you just said yourself, you're going to have to eventually come back for rezoning, right? If you do go any of those other routes.
Sure.
So wouldn't it be beneficial, I guess, to have a little bit more of a baked idea to bring before us at this
We don't know
moment?
exactly what it is because we have to get all the sewer. There's so many things that have to be put in place in order to develop this property, mainly the sewer.
Well, let me ask the staff something. If we make this RM20, no matter what happens, if they come back and Sorry. I mean, down the road, if it's RM20, they could still put up 700 units, no matter what. I mean, if it fits the code and everything else, you can't stop it, right? I mean, once it's RM20.
Density, once a zoning is approved, that's the density for that. With a multifamily complex, anything more than one building, it does have to come back as a master development plan, but the zoning itself would be set at the RM20, which would allow however many units per acre, or 20 units per acre, but how many units this would be allowed to have on the project.
Right, so you still can end up with 700 and some odd units. I mean, even though they're saying, it's not gonna be that because of the sewers, I mean, somewhere down the road, it could be 700 and some odd units.
By the zoning, that would be allowed.
Okay.
Is it a commercial zoning you can have an RM8 in, is that correct? That currently our commercial reads an RM8 would be allowed use?
For commercial zoning, you can have multifamily, and the multifamily has to meet the requirements of the RM8 at that point. It would not be an RM8 zoning, because the zoning would still be commercial, but any multifamily would have to meet the requirements that the RM8 would meet.
What is the RM8?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
What is the RM8 requirement?
RM8 is, the breakdown's 8 units per acre for the density. There are multiple requirements as far as design and so forth for that, the impervious areas and so forth. But as far as just straight density, it would be 8 units per acre.
Hey, keep in mind, there's floodway in here, there's gonna be massive detention areas. So there'll be a big chunk of this 37 acres that's taken up in green space, detention, floodway, so.
Sir, I feel like we're kind of getting lost in the weeds here.
Okay.
The plan is very clear. This is intended as a residential transition neighborhood. There are a ton of single-family large lots that abut this property. And the intention is multifamily residential, single-family attached residential, single-family detached residential, or civic institutional. And RM20 is not even an appropriate zoning for this type of property.
It's zoned commercial now, so.
Correct. And RM8, if you want to do multifamily residential under RM8, it sounds like you could do that. That's an option as well.
And that'll take away the efficiencies that we're trying to do up there. I mean, because keep in mind, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build workforce housing in Fairview. And so therefore, we have to get some of that density in order to make it affordable.
Yes.
Because if we don't have that density and we go past that, then all of a sudden, the rents that are charged, a lot of people can't afford, so.
I hear what you're saying, and the city's actually planned for that. So we have places in the plan where that type of housing can go. This is just not that lot.
And if an RM8 use is a permitted use in commercial and you have roughly 50 acres right now, you essentially would have nearly 400 multifamily unit density.
And then no commercial, that's correct.
But if you had, 37, you'd have that 304 number, which
Yeah,
is.
and from a, financial standpoint, because of what the price of the property is gonna be, and then the fact of the massive amount of infrastructure that's gonna have to be done, and then the massive amount that we're gonna have to pay in order to get the sewer, it's financially not feasible. That's why we need some of the density on the property in order to spread that, because the property sits in an area in a basin that is gravity fed, so therefore that's how we can make it work. Because if you don't do this, then you have to go with a decentralized, right, which is gonna burn up 5, 10, 15 acres, and then it's just all gonna be commercial, and then the rest of that's, so therefore, that's the need for some of this density. I understand the concern, but on the same token, that's why we're here, to try to make it affordable for people to stay in Fairview, to come back to Fairview. And we can't do it when we have a massive amount of money that we have to spend just to hook up to the sewer. And so therefore, we can offer smaller units that are affordable for people. That's why we need some of the density. At 300 units, it doesn't work, because then it doesn't leave anything for the commercial.
And then I guess I'm just trying, if you're gonna come back again for additional rezoning to try and capture some single families.
And that's what I'm saying, is that we have to come back into you to.
So I guess I'm just, if you're gonna adjust again, you're gonna lose RM20, so you're gonna lose that density you're going after right now. Wouldn't, because if it goes RM20, proceeds, and then something happens, it falls through, like Mr. Cowley said, it's RM20. We had a property over here that was an old townhome project that changed plans because
Sure.
of the zoning that was in place.
Our projection for total amount of units is somewhere around about 500 total units between the multifamily, the single family, the duplex, and the cottages and the cottages will be for sale. That'll be very affordable as well. So that's our objective, but to come in, that's why we're asking for this. And so when we come back in to put the overlay on it, then staff has to say, well, this is gonna work and this is not gonna work.
So of that 37 acres,
Yes, ma'am.
how much is buildable?
20,
So you would have 500 total units on 20 acres.
yes, ma'am.
When you say units, are you Are you talking about like vertical? Also, you're talking about apartments?
Talking apartments, single family, duplex.
Everything.
Everything, yes. I can assure you that there's no way that I'll put 700 apartment units up there. It just doesn't work. It can't work from a sewer capacity. There's only a certain amount of gallons that we can run through the sewer per day, and it will not allow for any more than about 500 units.
Do you already have your sewer taps in place, or
No, ma'am,
no?
because there is no taps. We have to connect to the sewer basin up there.
Oh, yeah.
So there won't be any decentralized. It'll just go straight into the Ferndale sewer basin.
To me, that's a positive to be thinking about.
We have worked, I mean, I don't want to, it's taken us 3 years. And Dixon has worked with us very well. Mr. Collins and I have worked on it. This has been a long process. So we're not going to put 700 units up there. The plan that you will see is going to be absolute mixed use. There's going to be commercial along the front. That'll go into a cottage type setting, then some multifamily in the back. To your point earlier about the lots that are around the perimeter of this property, that will be single family around that.
I like the idea of it, but I think being that it doesn't match the land use, I need you to come with a plan of more of the development. I would have a hard time voting right now just for a straight RM20. I understand the city needs housing like what you're describing. I'm in agreement. But I think because it doesn't match the land use or future land use map, it needs to be a master plan to approve it.
And I won't have time to do that, so it'll probably kill the project. So, I mean, if nothing else, I could probably come back and ask, what is the lesser amount for the zoning? Instead of an RM?
For multifamily, you have the RM20, which this is tonight, RM12, which would be 12 units an acre, or RM8, which is 8 units an acre.
So, but I guess I could come back in and ask for, the problem is if we don't get a certain amount of the density, we need at least about 500 units. And this is what I'm trying to reiterate, is that the sewer is such a massive expense that according to your future land use, if you did, single family won't work up there from the standpoint of how much ground that takes up compared to the amount that it costs to hook up to the sewer. So I understand, but on the same token, I want you to think about it from the standpoint of if we can only develop about 20 acres of it, if nothing else, then maybe what a compromise would be is that you don't rezone the whole 37 acres of it, but we get rezoning for 20 of the acres in order to develop up to 500 of the units, because that's what we need.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that map 046, part or parcel 87, not be rezoned from its current zonings of CG, commercial general, to RM20, multifamily residential.
I'll second it.
I would ask that you repeat your,
So we have a motion to not approve the zoning of RM20 request with a second from Callie. Jenkins first, Callie second. Is there additional discussion or questions? Mr. Sullivan?
Mr. Jenkins?
Aye.
Mr. Calley?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
no.
Ms. Rainey?
No.
Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Mr. McDonald?
Aye.
Ms. Qualls?
Nope.
Ms. Schulis?
Nay.
Say it again.
No.
Nay. Okay. Ms. Sinyard?
Aye.
Five yes, 4 no.
Thank you, Mr. Easton. So that's 5 yes for the not rezoning and 4 no. So
That is correct.
thank you, sir. Item 4, discussion City of Fairview Design Review Manual. So I know that I asked this to be added just from several questions coming up from the Design Review Manual recently in discussions. I know the staff eventually plans on completely reviewing this and incorporating it into our zoning ordinances like it is in most cases. But the continual question of the 70% brick specifically on that.
So, Mr. Butler, do you mind if I kind of
Yes,
chime
sir.
in here? So the staff, the question has become, as Commissioner Butler's mentioned several times, we've come up with the 70% brick requirement question as it relates to multifamily or similar. So I've provided you tonight with 2 documents stapled. I'm going to read through this, and part of it's likely not going to make sense, probably because first, I'm reading it and I may not make sense of it. Secondly, the language itself. But for the question of do we require 70% brick on certain developments, there are 2 lines to be considered here. The first is on page 1 of the stapled documents you have, under entitled paragraph number 1, building materials and colors. I'm going to read the first 2 sentences. They likely won't make sense, but hopefully they will in just a minute. And this is from our existing subdivision regulations. So the first sentence of that paragraph under building materials and colors reads as follows. The use of materials and colors compatible with buildings in the vicinity which comply with this manual is encouraged. So the first question you have as it relates to the 70% brick is if you have a building that's not in the vicinity of any other building to where there is compliance, then there's no reason to match the nearby buildings because they don't exist. So if you're talking about a parcel of woods surrounded by a parcel of woods, and you're going to build a multifamily complex in the center of that, if it's a parcel surrounded by woods and there's nothing else in the vicinity to comply to, then theoretically the 70% would not apply, right? So that's cumbersome problem number 1 with the regulations as they are written. The second sentence states a minimum of 70% brick coverage of each wall area which shall be accented by stone is required on all sides of commercial and institutional buildings, whether visible from a public street or not. The common belief over time has been that that sentence means that each wall must be 70% brick and must comply with other areas. But I would submit to you tonight, and Mr. Potter and I have discussed this, and this is gonna be odd, but I will submit to you tonight that it in fact does not say that. If you read the sentence again, as we've had to read several times, it reads, a minimum of 70% brick coverage of each wall area which shall be accented by stone, meaning if there's a wall area that is going to be accented by stone, it must be 70% brick. But if there's no wall area that is going to be accented by stone, it is not required to be accented by brick. So in evidence to move that forward, the reason I provided you this is, if you will take a pen, if you have it, to make this read what we think it was intended to read, and we read that sentence again, I'm going to ask you to insert 2 commas in this sentence. And hopefully there are no English teachers reading or watching this. So a minimum of 70% brick coverage, comma, of each wall area which shall be accented by stone, comma, is required on all sides of commercial and institutional buildings, whether visible from a public street or not. If you insert those commas, then yes, each wall area is required to be 70% brick and include a stone or brick border. Absent of those commas, then the 70% brick is only required on walls that are designed to be bordered by accented brick or stone.
It's certainly confusing.
It's,
But it might, it might turn, one could argue that it would turn on the difference between which and that. Everybody knows the difference between that. A lot of people don't know the difference between that. It's very confusing. Typically, which is prefaces a throwaway phrase, and that is a required phrase, so.
Can we not just rewrite it?
we have, so I say we have. So as a part of that, if you'll look at the second, so that's where the question comes in. So you get the discussions about where is brick required, where is it not required. We've typically employed that sentence, but that sentence is counter to what it was intended, we believe, to do. So if you look at page 2, Mr. Sullivan has prepared this. And the replacement for the paragraph that you just read is the use of materials and colors compatible with buildings in the vicinity which comply with this manual is encouraged. In all multifamily, residential, and commercial zone districts, each building wall area shall be constructed minimally of 70% brick and shall be accented by natural or manufactured stone. This is required on all sides of commercial, multifamily, and institutional buildings, whether visible from a public street or not. So we think what you have before you on page 2 was really the intent of what was drafted on page 1. So at a minimum, I would suggest changing the regulations to replace the paragraph we just read with the first paragraph.
I don't understand why you'd want to leave the word encourage.
You may not.
That is a non-enforceable word.
Right, so, but that's just where we are in the thing,
Right.
I get
If
that.
you're going to rewrite it, let's get that out.
Sure. So, and I think what that, Mr. Anderson, I think what that,
You always have shame as an element.
right. I think that applies also to, I think that line, that word is included in line 1 when you're talking about being compatible with other buildings in the area. And I think encouraged is not a message to the developer, it's a message to the planning commission. The regulations encourage the planning commission to require that it meet other areas, but certainly we could work on that language.
I would also like to add with that language, focusing on this area right here at the City Hall area. You have City Hall that was built 2005, 2006 area, brick, and then has the white trim around it. The bank that is directly in front was built to look similar to fit in that same style. So it was encouraged to have the similar style. Publix being next door but separated has a different look but would still meet the intent. So while the materials are correct on both, it is encouraged to meet the similar style of buildings in the immediate vicinity.
I have a question. So if we allow people, if it's compatible with the buildings in the vicinity, so if we're building something in an area where there's nothing around, what are the building requirements for that? Is it stone and masonry, or can it be vinyl siding? And then when you build that, then the next building is going to be compatible with that.
I believe that's the question is where we are now. I think that's what brought about the central question. I don't speak for Mr. Butler, but I think that's where we are, because when the real question came up is when do we and when or where do we require 70% brick? That's how we arrived at the question, and that's what led us to read the first paragraph that we discussed, and we found that oddity in the paragraph. So with that, I think, Mayor, your question is valid, is when you would require that, and I think that's part of the discussion tonight. And if you do so, how much is required to be brick? How much is not? What does that look like? So I don't want to overtake Commissioner Butler's discussion, because obviously he has some questions to bring up or suggestions, I assume. But staff, when we read this, we just recognized that the first paragraph we read presented some issues. So to clean up that paragraph, we suggest the second page.
Well, don't we have precedent that when the hardware store went to the appeals board, that they were requiring them to use masonry?
And I will just say, item 4 is prohibited building materials in the design review. So it specifically says, these prohibited materials include vinyl siding, exposed or painted corrugated metal, or plain sheet metal roofs, except that standing seam metal roofs and batten metal roofs are allowed. Exposed or painted metal siding, exposed standard concrete blocks, and exposed concrete tilt-up walls. So there are some materials that are prohibited.
Correct.
That's commercial and institutional buildings, correct?
Or in the vicinity if it were there. So I think what our bigger discussion is, because this highlights a whole broad 50 pages worth of discussion that's going to have to be rewritten or at some point reviewed. So I think the broader discussion centers around, and Commissioner Butler will tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the central discussion is going to fall tonight, based on Mr. Butler's question, about the requirement, however we get there, of a 70% brick on, because we're operating under the assumption that 70% brick was required. So to the mayor's point, I think all of those things are going to have to be redrawn in some way as part of a broader scope. Yes, absolutely. But the question, I think, is when would we require generally a 70% brick exterior on multifamily or building similar? I think.
Was there a history of that drove that at all? Because I guess until digging into it and Brandon bringing it up, that I did not, I guess I was reading it subconsciously as masonry instead of brick, where it could be stone or brick, which I think might be acceptable with Tennessee's history and architectural style.
Yeah, I think generally the 70% brick would have applied to brick, stone, masonry, that sort of thing. Now, if you dig further into the documents, it even goes so far as to mention hardy board. Right, hardy board is a brand. So you'd have to go, that would be equivalent of saying that Xerox machines are not allowed at City Hall, when in fact copier machines are, right? So at some point, we're going to have to go back and revisit all of those things, and that's going to take some work. But I think that the central question before the board tonight, or at least up for discussion by the board, that Commissioner Butler is bringing, is the mandate of 70% brick. Is that really reasonable or not? I think Commissioner Butler is the question, and I'll stop talking. But that's how. So for purposes after that discussion, we would suggest replacing paragraph 1 with paragraph 2 minimally as a starting point, and go from there. So I apologize for taking over your conversation, but.
No, that's perfect.
Just
What do
clear
our
it up.
neighboring cities require?
I have been studying profusely that question.
I'm talking about our county neighbors.
The City of Franklin, facades facing street or containing the primary entrance to dwelling shall provide a minimum of 3 of the following design features for each residential unit fronting onto a street. The one that lists materials is different exterior building materials and/or colors for each unit, alternating among brick, painted brick, siding, and stone. They go on to as far as architectural details, as far as setbacks, adjustments, and transfers from individual units, which I think we'll probably dig into once we get into that design review manual for sure. It also says the City of Spring Hill specifically states what you cannot use. So it says facades must be designed with consistent materials and treatments that wrap around all facades. There must be a unifying architectural theme for the entire multifamily, excuse me, or townhouse development, utilizing a common vocabulary of architectural forms, elements, materials, or colors in the entire structure. The following are prohibited on any facade: plain concrete block and plastic. The following are prohibited as primary surface finish material on any facade, but may be used as decorative only or detail only. It's up to 20% of the facade: corrugated metal, aluminum, exposed aggregate, rough finish concrete wall panels, T111 composite plywood siding, vinyl, and exterior EIFS. So that's City of Spring Hill. Brentwood doesn't have much on multifamily because they don't have much multifamily. And then some of the other communities are, Nolensville and stuff are working on things right now. I actually watched a Nolensville meeting a couple weeks ago where they were discussing what they wanted their town center, their multifamilies, their condos to look like, and they had a plethora of pictures and photos from all over the nation of different design ideas and things. So I think in Lockwood Glen, where I'm familiar with, there's about a 15% of brick used, and then they did a bunch of different designs as far as siding, board and batten design details. the Bellevue One Place in Bellevue is also 15%. They got really creative and used most of the brick on the front facade. And so when you see it from the main arterial streets, you're seeing mainly brick. As you enter on the inside, you see a little bit more of the siding use. But never vinyl is certainly something that is consistent.
So that development is the same development that the guy is doing, the 96 highway development? Is that the same guy?
The Lockwood Glen and Bellevue One Place, yes, ma'am.
So have we had a lot of complaints from developers about the requirement?
There's a lot of people asking questions because the interpretation of 70% brick, the concept plan that was submitted would not have met that interpretation if it was indeed 70% brick.
Which concept plan?
The one that was submitted with that rezoning that you're asking about.
I think the planning commission submission did not include a concept plan.
He just had, okay.
He showed it to us
Yeah,
when we met
sure.
with them independently, but we didn't have one as part of planning commission.
Yeah. But that's what people are just asking, what is the interpretation? And now I think it helps us with that new proposed, and then you could talk in length about architectural details and setbacks and adjustments, and like on townhomes, when one townhome starts and the next one stops, when the next one starts, do you change color, you change material? So there's so many different details that all these communities have that include, like you go into the town center of West Haven, it's full of brick siding. There's so many different architectural details, and it's a very appealing and attractive entrance. So the question was, if the intent is 70% brick, what are we okay with if it's not in that use? Like for instance, when it's not comparable in the vicinity, like you said,
I'm sorry, when it's what?
and not in the vicinity, like the language.
Yes, I mean, that could, because if we're not, I guess it kind of concerns me that we would even start talking about now kind of lessening our requirements. And it kind of sounds like that's what we're trying to do.
I would say is improving your requirements if in the vicinity right now there's no stance, if we were to put a stance in. I think it was when the Fred's building was put in, it was a full metal building. Directly after is when this design review manual was created, so in 2007. It has not been visited or discussed since. And yeah, the Fred's building, or the pharmacy now.
I think we've used the Fred's building forever as the poster child for why we started changing lots of stuff.
I think that's the design review manual, I think was stimulated from that.
Does anyone know of how many proposed commercial or multifamily have been killed by this 70% brick?
I don't think we necessarily have anything killed. The Westway Apartments is finished right now, and it does not meet that 70% brick. So I guess the interpretation was, as we've read on it there.
What doesn't meet it?
The Westway Apartments that is completing right now behind or across from Tractor Supply.
How did they did they ask for a variance?
I think interpretation of the 70% must have adjusted because I read the minutes, I didn't see a variance mentioned.
What influenced the 70, just a gut response to the Freds, or was any of that influenced by comments from like Chief Hughes or the fire department on, burning and things like that?
I couldn't tell you the intent because it was 2007.
The Freds? Was that your question?
Or the 70%
I didn't
break.
know if the fire department had led any suggestions on the amount of masonry product in multifamily.
I don't think so. I think when Fred's came in, because at that point in time, I was involved with the tree board. So when Fred's was built and we realized how that looked, what they had done with the landscaping, I think then everyone started pushing for, we've got to make sure this doesn't happen all up and down Highway 100. So I think that's when everything kind of started changing and we started pushing for improvements. I don't think the fire department had any codes. I think that probably we just kind of started looking at what was around us and what we could do.
Yeah, there was no design standard at the time, that's right.
Yes,
So
it was,
kinda-
if you can build it, we'll let you build it. If it'll stand up 6 months, you can build it here.
It was the wild, wild west out here?
Well, yeah, kinda. So, I'm kind of agree. How many projects have not come here because they perceived there was a 70% masonry requirement?
I think a lot of times in this, as they come to us, that's when it's called to attention that we haven't had a lot of multifamily, the Westway apartments we had, and it was not adhered to that. So that would be the only one that would have been in question that has been submitted, to my knowledge.
And how did they, I didn't hear again, I'm new, so how did they not adhere to the building code?
I could not tell you that answer. When I read the minutes, it was not, the variance was not listed during the motion. Maybe the interpretation of this was here, and that was probably 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I don't think the staff currently here was the staff at the time, so I don't think they would have
Have
the
any
answer.
history?
At the time of that building was being approved, the staff has flipped 2 or 3 times since and during that entire process. To say right, wrong, and different, I'll just say staff has flipped several times with people, with positions, with who's here, who's not here, from top to bottom.
Commissioner Butler?
Yes, sir.
I have a comment but before I give that comment, is there any action that needs to be taken right now from this discussion?
If we want to clear the language from the document, the proposed that Mr. Sullivan put together, we could, I believe we can make a motion on that to change that language.
Okay.
Or anything else that you want to make a motion on, but.
Okay, sounds good. I will not be making a motion, but I will say the design review manual and the updating of it is a part of our 2040 comprehensive plan. As a matter of fact, it's policy LUDC 15-17.A in the comprehensive plan. That's a short-term priority according to the comp plan and should be accomplished within 3 years of adopting the plan. So this is definitely something that regardless, we've already decided as a city that we're going to be working on and we're going to be revising this entire thing. So this is just a small, tiny portion of the entire process.
No, absolutely. That's a good point. And I know it's on the staff's radar, and I think when we get the zoning ordinances done, that's probably one of the next things that's going to be tackled, to where it could be a company. Like most municipalities don't have a separate design review manual. It's in their zoning ordinances. And so we're going to revise and revisit and include it into that series. So I know it's on their radar. But the question was brought to me multiple times, so I decided to ask about it, and the language and interpretation was brought up of, what exactly does it mean as written.
If we're going to clean this up, I would really like to clean up the sentence that says compatible to buildings in the vicinity. Because if you're just building in the middle of nowhere, and I'd also like to strike the word encouraged.
If you're making a motion, if you'll tell me how you want it to read, that's how it'll be brought back to you. But if you'll do that in a motion form, I will write it the best I can, and then we'll have it back
Okay.
for approval next month.
Okay, well, all right, so would it make sense to strike the first sentence?
And that would be changing the intent currently as it reads, and we would be the only one in Williams County that would require that much brick. And that's what the kind of discussion was. Do we say masonry? Or we talked about earlier, the intention would be masonry, or is it truly the intention of this board for brick?
Well, wait a minute, let's do one thing at a time.
Shouldn't we just tackle this all at once down the road instead of piecemealing it now?
I agree with that.
I think it's fair.
Yeah, is there some reason why we need to do that now?
No, that's
For
what I was
this one?
afraid of. You could go through that document and have all sorts of questions, but just the interpretation and now the new language here, I think, captures my question. And then as we get to it, we'll really dig in. We'll have work sessions as a group and have that discussion.
We revise it to this statement tonight, we can revise it again later.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so what do we say? I mean, so if we're going to have a subdivision that's being built,
This would not pertain to a subdivision.
oh, I'm sorry, a development. multifamily residential. And if we're gonna have a multifamily residential area built now, so this first sentence would apply, that we encourage that they would build what's around them.
That's how it's written currently, and that's how the proposed is written for anything around to be similarly styled to the buildings in the vicinity which comply with this manual. Yes, ma'am.
And I'll just add one more thing, real quick if I can. Just reading through that first and second sentence, it's, to me, and I may be totally wrong on this, but my interpretation of the first sentence is that that's more for color than just material. It's more of trying to make it match if there's something already there. The second sentence, it says, in all multifamily residential, each building wall has the brick. So the first sentence becomes irrelevant other than the fact that it would then require buildings that are in the vicinity to be of the same type. So I just
Okay.
want to,
That
if
makes
I'm
sense.
looking at the code and I'm trying to enforce it, that's the way I would interpret it myself. It may be incorrect the way it's written, but that's,
So how you interpret that is if I'm building a multifamily residential area, that even though I'm building it in the middle of the woods where there's no development, I'm still restricted by the second sentence. It's suggestive there's something there that I try to match that development as much as possible. But no matter, I have to do from the second sentence on. Okay, then I'm good with that.
That wasn't the interpretation that started this discussion. So then that goes back to this question of, is 70% brick our intention?
What do you suggest, 50% brick?
That's what, the local municipality, we would be the only one in Williams County requiring that. No one is over 15%. Some of them have more on arterial facing streets that are provided. So we would be the only one having 70%. And so, and these are kind of, like I was saying, they're kind of clumped to where it says architectural style should match commercial, which in theory or in architectural design, I don't think that you necessarily want your publics to match your townhome community, where you're going to have a mixed use of, where you could have siding, masonry siding, or brick, or painted brick, or things like that. You want more, setbacks. You want more, a higher pitch on your roof angles, where Publix has a flat roof. And so right now, those two clump commercial and multifamily, which is townhome or apartments together, as similar like architecture, which I don't think is, that application is used anywhere in the Middle Tennessee area.
That's why I think we should just wait and have a work session and put this together the right way instead of slapping something together now that might not make any sense.
I do too.
But I don't think we need to stick to 70% brick either, just,
I think that the interpretation, how it's being used right now, would satisfy that, like Micah said earlier, you're trying to capture a goal of if something was built next door and everything right here is brick, it's going to try and be compatible to the area around it.
Yep.
And sometimes the town center might have a different design standard or language or breakdown. So I think how it's being interpreted and used right now would still capture, in theory, and hopefully we can push on trying to discuss that soon.
I'd like to make a motion that we defer this until we sit down and have a work session and hammer this out, and further request that we have a work session on this issue as soon as possible.
I'll second that motion.
Let me find myself here. So item 4, Anderson, deferment until further time for a work session or open discussion with staff. Anderson and Rainey was the second, correct?
Yes.
Any additional questions or discussion? Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Ms. Rainey?
Aye.
Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Mr. Calley?
Aye.
Mr. Jenkins?
Aye.
Mr. McDonald?
Aye.
Mr. Qualls? Ms. Shoeless?
Aye.
Ms. Inyard?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. The bonds, no, there's no action needed, right? This is more of a notification process. So item 1, performance bond, Otter Creek subdivision, Phase 1, Section 1, $136,100. Item 2, performance bond, Otter Creek subdivision, Phase 1, Section 2, $106,000. And item 3, performance bond, Otter Creek subdivision, Phase 2, $783,000. Reports for discussion and information. Mr. Sullivan?
I don't think I have anything tonight. I hope to get some of this put together for us to have a work session on and discuss it, but other than that, that's all I've got.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Collins? Mr. Blackburn?
Yeah, it's just one quick thing. So with the performance bond reductions, those reductions include infrastructure that we have looked at and taken a look at for Otter Creek that has been put in per the plans. The items that have not been addressed in the plans yet or accepted, that is the remainder of what's in the bond. So that's how the bond was reduced. There was a question brought up to staff that about that reduction, and that's what that is. There were some questions about inspections and runoff and things like that. Staff has been working with TDEC closely, been on site multiple times, working with them. Told them that we'll give them whatever meeting that they want. Anytime that they've gone on site, I've offered my assistance in that. So I'm trying to do everything that I can do within our code to enforce what we've got approved. So in some cases, TDEC is the enforcing agency. Unfortunately, sometimes that takes a little longer than what we'd like, but they have assured me that they are looking into every issue that's been brought forward. So
you're saying they're looking into what they brought up earlier?
absolutely.
And will these bonds help with that in any way, or?
What was that?
Bonds.
The bonds?
The bonds don't cover, the bonds that are left cover reclamation of the site to clean up anything that is related to erosion and sediment control.
So does that include
That's why the bond is not zero for those, because everything else has been complete.
so does that include the damage to the creek since it's erosion?
Well, at that point, it's damage to the property itself. Once it gets into the waters of the U.S., it becomes an EPA and TDEC enforcement.
Any additional questions? Thank you for that update. Yes, sir. If you could step to the podium if you have a question there. So the first two were performance bonds on phase one where there's infrastructure in place, so roads, curbs, things like that.
And stormwater retention or mitigation?
It doesn't include, the amount that's left on the bond includes work to be done. So the work that's been completed per the plans are such things as the trees, the sidewalk, the asphalt, the curbs, and that.
Stormwater's not part of that?
Stormwater's not in that.
Can we enforce the silt fences that they were talking about? I mean, having them.
The silt fence is a permitted thing with TDEC, so.
That's not part of our permit.
That's right. We don't issue a.
They come to this
EPSC.
meeting, this very room, to get permission from this board and yourself. You're the man that goes out there and approves and inspects. And so, and they come before this board to get approval. And now you're passing the buck to another agency to enforce what this body has approved, is what you're saying. You're saying it's not your jurisdiction. It's not your ball of wax, it's somebody else's.
Maybe this is a question for our lawyer here.
I am, but this.
Sir, really quick, before you step away, what was your name again?
My name is Aaron Davis.
Aaron. Personal opinions, I agree with you 100%. There's still nothing I can do. It pisses me off, and I said that just on a public forum. It's like on Facebook Live, hey, whatever. It ticks me off that that's happening. It shouldn't happen, and it bothers the heck out of me. But it sounds like we don't have any sort of authority here to do anything about it.
I don't believe that.
Listen.
That's easy. That's the easy thing to do.
Once
Say,
again-
we can't do anything.
Once again, it's over my pay grade too. What I know about my authority is what he tells me.
The links that you guys just went to discuss the percentage of brick on the front of a building, and this development is destroying our creek. It's going by Bill Lee's house.
I see it. So
This
I
is
guess-
frustrating.
So what can we do? Is it just TDEC? Are they the only governing authority that could do anything about it, or is it the Board of Commissioners? What?
Perhaps a phone call to Bill Lee. Have you tried that?
I'm gonna go to, I'm gonna give the same packet and say, hey, Mr. Lee, I'm your neighbor. This is going through your yard. I'm gonna do that.
He should be able to get TDEC out here to do something quickly.
Well, I'll tell you, I called Mr. Bill, well, no, I sent him a letter and about something else out here, and I got a response within about a week.
No,
So, I'm just saying you may try
I'd
it.
like to think that this body and the citizens of this community and my neighbors and the rest of the
We
people
feel-
up and down,
We feel
this
just
is,
like you do. We really, I think all of us do.
You should have been.
We really do.
We were all really upset with them.
no, I mean, I want development. It's good for the community. It increases our property value. It's wise to develop the right way. They're gonna make a ton of money and good on them. But they ain't even got silt fence. That's the minimum thing. I mean, they got culverts pointing directly into the forest and pictures of the creek before they ruined it on the wall inside their office.
We don't like it.
I mean, I don't know what else to do.
Well,
They're being sued by multiple parties. I mean,
Do we still have the stop work order on that development?
No, they posted their bond and they filed the appropriate forms.
They posted the bond that we just read about?
That's right.
Last month.
Well, no, the phase 2 bond was just
They've already posted that bond for phase 2.
that we just.
they didn't even have permits to build what they were doing out there on that from TDEC.
So I have actually an email from Brandon Yates at TDEC right here that basically says,
Just read it.
you know, well, he just says, I have a call with Kevin Blackburn today to discuss what authority tools the city has available to resolve the issues. I try to make sure that municipalities inside my assigned counties use the tools they have, fines, penalties, stop work orders, etc., before TDEC will get involved. I will likely send a notice of violation based on your photos to provide documentation for a potential enforcement case. But TDEC is also saying that, you know, the municipality in Fairview has the ability to issue fines, penalties, stop work orders.
If the developer is not complying with one class approved, if they are building what the city has approved to be built, that's the
I
scope.
assure you this body did not approve culverts to point into the woods. We're all brighter than that to assume that that's what that we're doing.
To make sure, and I don't know, we need to know if they're complying with what has been approved to be built. Outside of that, we don't have environmental enforcement power in the city of Fairview. That's not our purview. You have rights as a citizen.
You got the right to say, hey, don't pollute the water.
You have a right to say don't build anymore until you clean up.
You have to go to court.
Such a lazy response to this situation.
Mr. Davis, I think that's out of order.
I'm just saying, but we're not gonna do anything. Go to court.
Sir, I think you have a hand, I would feel like a lot of people on this board probably agree with you, a lot more than you realize. But there's certain things that we're allowed to do and certain things we're not. We can't just go out there and just on a vendetta tell somebody to stop working because we feel that they're
It's not
doing
a
something
vendetta,
wrong.
it's
I know,
breaking
I
the
understand
law.
that, sir, trust me. I'm trying to help you here. A lot of us agree with you. And if there is something that can be done and we figure that out, I'm sure it will happen. But
What can we
But getting
do?
upset
What can
about
we-
it and
No,
yelling
I-
at us isn't gonna help.
No, it's just frustrating because
I understand,
my yard is orange and I got a guy telling me just to go to court. So can anybody give me, apart from just saying go to court, what can we do as citizens to inform this body and the various people that are in authority that are able to do something. What can we do to help? Should we put you on CC on these
First,
pictures?
I would suggest taking this to the Board of Commissioners, just because
Yes,
they actually
sir.
have authority much greater than anybody on this board, well, in this capacity anyway. I would start there. If you wanted to get heard, I mean, talking to us about it, we really don't have that ability to do anything.
What was the date from the TDEC email there? So is it recent inspection? Are they active? Have they been there? So over a month ago. And they were on site recently, is that correct? So they are coming out. So they're the one that enforces and creates the permit. They're the professionals that have the resources to inspect, to tell us if they're in compliance or not in compliance. And so, our opinion would be subjective, based off, of seeing things. The professionals who issued the permit would be the one that's gonna tell us their systems are in place, their systems are failing, their systems have failed. And so hopefully we get some kind of report or update from their recent visit to tell us where it's at currently. So then we know from a professional opinion of the state of what is the current status.
Mr. Davis, we understand your frustration because we are just as frustrated. There was nothing any more frustrating to me than when I got involved in the Board of Commissioners that we didn't have the authority to do a lot of stuff that I thought we should be able to go out and stop that, but we can't. And I understand your frustration.
I don't mean to be disrespectful either, sir. I don't.
I'm saying to you, sir, look, if you believe that there, as a citizen, you have adjacent property or adjoining property, and they're damaging your property, then you should take legal action to get.
And I am.
Can I help? Doing further work. You have more standing than we do.
So why wasn't an ARAP required for this property, for this development? So in the files that I copied on Otter Creek, and the city.
I'm sorry, excuse me, miss. We haven't heard your name yet.
Oh, I'm Tiffany Wilson Mobley. I'm 7303 Cox Run Court. So one of the things that I had copied once upon a time was on information on Otter Creek, and I'm just wondering why an ARAP wasn't required. This is a pre-construction meeting.
So as far as an ARAP goes,
Right.
it was recommended by comment. That ARAP is not a city-issued permit.
But
It is a federal,
Right.
I'm sorry, it's a federal permit,
Right.
and it's issued by TDEC. The city does not have the authority to grant anyone the ability to hang on a second, to alter an aquatic resource. It has to go through the proper channels. So all we can do is recommend that as a city, that the permitting agency follow through with their proper due diligence process.
TDEC did not, TDEC isn't part of this pre-construction meeting. It says TDEC FEMA core permits required. So you've got a receiving stream, which is actually not the stream, and the ARAP required is no, but the ARAP has to do with section 404, 401, the pollution. So why in any case where it would be going into water would it be required? And I do want to also say, I did talk to people at TDEC, and one of the things that they are saying is they're very understaffed. So developers really know this, they're not able to catch all of this, and they really can work this 7-day violation period. So the reality is TDEC is not able to do all of this. So just kind of continually just saying that TDEC's doing it, when really that should have been done in the first place.
Mr. Potter, is this the appropriate time and place for this discussions to be going on? Okay, thank you.
This isn't? Oh, I thought you were wondering how the board could be helpful with this in the future, or.
Ms. Wilson-Mobley, if you could submit that stuff to the board if you want to, if you have preference,
It's in
yeah.
your files.
We don't have the documents in front of us and stuff to talk to you about it or to reference
I
it.
mean, it's
So
from
if
your
you-
guys' files.
If you, that's fine. If you want to submit the question, the staff, I'm sure, would be happy to review it.
Okay, I just think if you don't have the proper, I mean, that could have been prevented in the first place, is the question.
Thank you. City Attorney, Mr. Potter. Communication from the Planning Commission members, Mr. McDonald.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jenkins?
Just a quick note on when we discussed item 3 tonight regarding the RM20 rezoning. I had made a motion to not have that rezoned to RM20, and then there was an opportunity for discussion afterwards, and there was no discussion. Yet when it came time to vote, there were 4 people that voted against my motion. So I'm just confused. Is that a situation where there's confusion around double negatives, where I said not rezone, and then whenever it came time, people said nay, thinking that like it was not supposed to be rezoned? I don't know. I was a little confused there. Would anybody like to clarify?
We disagreed with you.
So you would like it to have been rezoned to RM20? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that was totally clear, because there was an opportunity to discuss, but no one discussed anything. No, there was there was an opportunity for discussion after I made the motion, and no one discussed anything.
There was no need to discuss
We had a
it.
time for discussion and had a discussion. I think that's satisfying.
Okay. Yeah, that's all. Just if we have an opportunity to discuss with each other, we should do it if we disagree, not just sit quietly.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Sinyard?
Nothing for me tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Schulis?
Nothing.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly? Thank you, sir. Ms. Qualls?
No, I just appreciate the people that got up and spoke tonight. I thought it was good, and especially the lady that just walked out. I don't know her name, but I really appreciated what she got up and said tonight. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mayor Rainey?
Nothing tonight, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Nothing tonight.
Thank you, sir. I will just add a quick note. I have been trying to push for a joint workshop, and everybody might shoot me just bring it up. But so we're going to discuss it with the board in the future, just so you know, we might send you a note for a future joint workshop. Essentially, several other municipalities around us have it, where the planning commission and the board get together with an applicant and go over the submittal. There's no vote taken. There's no business action item. It's just an opportunity for everybody to kind of discuss, compare it to the comp plan, the land use plan, the future use, kind of everybody get it out. Nolensville is using it. Franklin has used it for a long time. I think you get an opportunity for citizens to come out, hear it, see it, and everyone kind of gets an overview before it kind of starts the planning to the board process. So there might be, if the board sees fit that they would like to have a joint workshop, we might send you that note scheduling it, if staff lets me. And that's all I have. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.